Hi there, Steve here. I've now completed a week of Turkish. I want to talk a bit about my experience, my first week with Turkish, as part of a sort of a description of how I see the language learning process. All right. I've used various metaphors in the past. I've referred to the idea of language learning as sort of a snowball, that the more words you pick up, the more words you can acquire. That certainly becomes true in that second stage. I've talked about three stages. The first stage, where we struggle to get a sense of this strange language, which is just noise, where it's no longer strange, it becomes a little bit familiar to us. That's the first stage. The second stage, where we start to accumulate more and more words until we get comfortable in the language. Then the third stage is once we are totally able to enjoy the language. We still make mistakes, we still have things we don't understand, but we are enjoying genuinely interesting content, movies, whatever, discussions, and we are continuing to infinity in terms of trying to improve as much as we can in the language. So I'm very much at the first stage. So if I look at my first week of activity, and remember again that the key thing in language learning is activity. It's interacting with the language. Don't worry about what you achieve. Don't worry about what you remember. Just make sure you engage with the language. So that's what I've been doing. So if I look at my statistics at LingQ, for example, for the past week, I think I'm up to over 500 known words. I have saved, I think, 2,500 links. And of those, I have learned some 350 of them, so that the remaining links that I've created are still yellow links on my lesson page, because I keep on seeing them in new stories, but I don't yet feel that I know them. I feel I know 500, of which 350 were learned. Presumably the other 200 were picked up because they were similar to other words, or they were words that came from another language, French or English or Arabic or Persian, and I felt that I knew them without having to look them up. I have read, I think, 25,000 words, sometimes reading the same lesson twice, but it's all reading. So I have been very active. I had one very active day 2 days ago where I created 1,000 links. I have read the first 53 stories in the mini stories series. But if I look at these on my lesson page, the early stories are largely white or pale yellow, as these words are gradually becoming known. The more recent stories that I have read are full of dark yellow words and phrases that I have saved, that I have looked up, but that I don't yet know. And as I progress into new stories, it'll be very heavy to blue. 30, 40, 50% of the words in the new stories will be stories that I haven't yet met on LingQ. So that the jigsaw puzzle, insofar as the first 5, 6, 7 stories are concerned, there the jigsaw puzzle is starting to show me some shape, because once the page is white, that means that in my mind these words are clear. Now, the next stage, of course, is to get to where I can listen to these stories and understand them. And of course, I'm not yet there. So I can read stories, story 10, story 15. I understand it. I can listen and read. I can go through listening sentence by sentence and reading it and understanding it, listening while reading. But when I go off and listen without the help of the text, I have trouble understanding it. So that's kind of my process after 1 week of Turkish on LingQ. That's sort of the level of activity. I have exposed myself to the language. I don't understand that well, but I understand when I read. Now, one thing about the language learning process, it's very much a matter of doing some of this and some of that, going forward, coming back. And I mention that because, it's good to vary things. Like if I have a very heavy day where I saved 1,000 links and I plowed forward into 10 or 15 new stories, the next day I'm a little tired of doing that. So to vary things, I have a book. Okay, Complete Turkish. It has audio. I can't listen to the audio because it's full of English. John and Mary go to the grocer and order bread, and great long explanation in English of the story. I don't like listening to that because I like listening to the target language many times, so I can't listen to that stuff. But it is interesting because they start to introduce, for example, verbs. And whatever they say about the verbs are things that I have already experienced. So there is no urgency to introduce verbs or anything at any particular time. You can always go back to it. Similarly with basic greetings. I'm not necessarily very good at saying hello, how are you in Turkish. And in this book, they introduce very early going to the store to buy bread or olives and stuff like that. I haven't necessarily come across these words in my mini stories. However, with the intensive exposure that I have had to the Turkish language through what I have done in the first week, when I go into this book and I look up or I read their explanation about how verbs work or how cases work, or how to say hello, how are you, good evening, good morning, it becomes a lot easier for me because I have had this exposure through my activities at LingQ. So the point I want to make is that language learning, to me, the process is not one of building blocks. You learn this, and once you have that, you learn the next step and the next step. It's more a matter of exposing yourself to a lot of different elements in the language, constantly being able to go back and review things that you have forgotten or things that might be considered basic, but when they are first introduced, you aren't yet in a position to absorb them. But if you have simply allowed yourself, like when I plow into the new stories where there are a lot of new and unknown words, I kind of feel as if I'm cross-country skiing and let's say I'm going around this track twice. So the first time I'm actually having to create the track because the snow is deep and I'm skiing and creating a track. But the second time I come through there, I already have a track and I'm going more easily, more smoothly. So this is it. You have to kind of go around the track many, many times, picking up different things each time. Maybe if I'm going through the forest, I'll notice a different tree each time, and that is the process. So I don't know if I make any sense, but I just wanted to stress the fact that the key aspect of language learning is to be active, to interact with the language, to push yourself, to explore, and you can always go back later and pick up other bits and pieces when you are motivated to do so. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.